All right, so let's dive right in. We're going to be talking about anxiety, and I hope to give you a different perspective on from the neck up and the neck down for different treatment targets for looking at anxiety. So we're going to cover today some conventional treatments, important points as far as history taking, lab workup recommendations, and how you decipher which testing to order, the subtype descriptions, the importance of diet and anxiety, and a little bit of look at the literature of what's been published. Of course, we'll talk a lot about herbs and just a little bit about supplements, and then kind of how you pull all this information together. So if we look at serum labs, I've kind of broken these down into tiers. So generally first tier, always looking at thyroid. I mean, you can do as in-depth of a thyroid assessment as you feel is necessary. I do like a reverse T3 as a measurement in terms of kind of that fight or flight mode. Ferritin, wanting ferritin to be over 40, looking at homocysteine, GGT as a measurement in terms of kind of need for glutathione, which we'll talk about later, and then assessment of fasting glucose. So one thing that I've done here is I've broken down into the primary complaint, where your mind should go, because one thing we don't want to do is overwhelm our patients with tests, especially tests that likely are not covered or have good coverage from insurance companies. And so I think it's important for us to narrow that down, and we really only have one starting place. So we'll get more into those subtypes in just a minute, but it doesn't matter what subtype, it doesn't matter what above the neck or below the neck subtype we're looking at. I think that diet is crucial with this population. And so one question is why? Well, I've made this really rough schematic on kind of all the effects that diet has and how they link to behavior changes and everything. So we know that diet directly affects the gut microbiome composition. The gut microbiome composition affects neurotransmitter levels. The gut microbiome is also responsible for micronutrient activation. There's that diet itself directly affects tight junctions in the gut, and leaky tight junctions can increase inflammation, and we know that inflammation contributes to behavioral changes. So let's look at some different treatment considerations. Okay, I think over here, if we're looking back at the conventional side, one thing that's really interesting is that all of these medications have some type of anti-inflammatory action. So in addition to directly affecting serotonin or norepinephrine receptors, they do have some anti-inflammatory and some neuroplasticity stimulating action of these drugs. Okay, so Bacopa we wouldn't normally really be talking about as the premier anti-anxiety herb, but this is a really good herb for the overwhelmed anxiety, right? And it basically is somewhat stimulating to the brain, increasing cerebral blood flow. So, it's that brain tonic. It helps with enhancing memory and concentration and kind of assimilating knowledge. And so if we think about those different brain subtypes of the one that, remember, the brain was running really, really, really slow, like there's all these computer windows open, right? That Bacopa is a really good plant for that. It also is a fantastic antioxidant. It increases BDNF, right? Increases cerebral blood flow. So we have all these other actions that actually make it a really good candidate for a lot of the other subtypes that could be all the other anxiety subtypes as well. Okay, so to sum up, anxiety is not a homogeneous disorder. I really see the value in brain mapping as a useful tool to determine subtypes of anxiety, and really recognizing that all anxiety does not look the same in the brain. And that, as we talked about, that overwhelm pattern, which is more characteristic of panic, is not the same as anxiety, and really creating that distinction between the overwhelmed, which can lead to more panic attacks, versus anxiety.